डॉक्टर बाबासाहेब आंबेडकर ओपन यूनिवर्सिटी.
Dear students, I, Dr. Shivang Patel, Associate Professor from School of Computer Science, Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar Open University, welcome you all from Chaitanya Studio of Babasaheb Ambedkar Open University in the lecture series of Python programming. In the previous session, we have discussed various decision control statements, or you can say that the conditional statements, in which we have seen with examples and demonstrations if conditions, if conditions, all these statements that we have discussed. Now in today's session, we are going to cover various loop constructs. So as you already aware, in different programming languages, suppose you want to repeat some of the statements, you want to execute some of the statements repeatedly. In that case, the concept of loop that can be used in any of the programming languages. The same concept is used here in the Python. So at the end of unit, you will be able to understand how to use repetition in the program. So the basic concept is that if you want to repeatedly execute some of the statements, in that case you have to use loop statements. So as in other programming languages, Python also supports while loop and for loop for repetition execution of the statements. Now how to execute program using for loop, how to execute program using while loop, how to use that particular loop structure, or you can say that how to use this loop within loop, that is the nested concept of loop, that we will also see at the end of this unit. Now we are starting with the loop construct. So as you already aware, suppose you want to execute some of the statements multiple times. In that case you are having two options. Suppose you want to execute some block of statements, or you can say that the body of the loop for some amount of time based on some certain condition that can be executed, or it may be unconditional. In that case you can use this concept that is called loop construct. So basically all programming languages that support this concept, and in this loop construct basically it is composed of two parts. One is control statement and another is body of the loop. Now what is control statement? That is nothing but the test expression, or you can say that the condition. Now after checking the condition, whatever the body of the loop that can be executed. So that test expression or the condition that will be considering as the control statement, and after execution, successfully execution of that condition, whatever the statements that can be executed that resides in the block, and that is nothing but the body of the loop, right? So you can execute that statement based on certain decision or based unconditionally, that maybe depends on the condition. Now we are starting with the for loop, or you can say that the for condition or for statement. Now suppose you want to execute some of the statements repeatedly for fixed number of time. In that case you are using this for statement. Now the iteration over sequence of values. Now in the previous session we have already discussed which are the data structures that are available in the sequence. So this contains list, tuple, dictionary, string. So any of the sequence that you want to repeatedly execute some of the statements, in that case you are using this statement. Now you can see the flow diagram or flow chart as well as the syntax of for loop, or you can say that the for statement. So in the flow diagram you can say see the previous statement, then after initialization, as you already aware, if you want to execute loop, you are requiring some iteration variable, and that is nothing but some counter, you can say that. So you have to first initialize that counter, that which value you want to start your loop, or how many times you want to execute the loop, that can be defined by that counter value. So first of all you have to initialize the statement, then after in the diamond you can check the condition, right? So basically two output, it may be true or it may be false. So if the condition is satisfied, in that case you can say that the exit loop. So is the last number of sequence reached? So whatever the number of times you want to execute the loop, and whenever you are incrementing that particular counter variable, and if the counter variable value that matches with whatever the end value of your loop. In that case, you have to exit the loop. But suppose that value doesn't match, till that time you want to execute some of the statements. So you can say that if the condition is false, in that case some block of statements or the body of the loop that you have to execute multiple times. That is the basic flow of for statement. Now you can see the syntax. So for, that is the keyword, then after variable, so you have to define one counter variable, then after in, that is the keyword again, range, that is the inbuilt function. Now that inbuilt function having multiple parameters, here you see on the screen basically three parameters are there. One parameter, that is value 1, second one is value 2, and third one is INCR, that is increment. So what this indicates, so first of all, from where you want to start. So the counter variable, the value of the counter variable, that initially you want to start from which value, that you have to mention in the value 1. It is optional, right? That's why here square bracket that can be mentioned. If you are not mentioning here that value 1, by default the Python will consider 1, right? Then after second is value 2, up to which value you have to iterate the loop. That means how many times the block of statements you want to repeat, that value you have to mention here. So say for example, you can say that it is the upper limit, you are entering 5 here in the value 2. So up to 4 that will be executed. So whatever the last value that can be ignored, that cannot be considered, but lesser than that value only 1, that will be considered here in the value 2. Third one is INCR, that is increment, that is you can say that the step for iterating your particular loop. Again it is optional. If you are indicating here some value, so that iteration jumps up to that value, but here you are not mentioning that increment variable, in that case by default value is 1. So after that you have to put that colon, then after the block of the code that will be executed. Now we will see one example, so you can get more idea how the for loop will execute. Here the description will be given as we have already discussed in the range function, 3 parameters, here it is mentioned value 1, value 2 and INCR. Now you can observe on the screen, basically this is the program if you want to print the value from 1 to 5. So loop will be mentioned here, for loop, that is the keyword. Mind well, it is the case sensitive, so you have to keep whatever the syntax, that is as it is, you have to use. Then after num, that is the variable, here num is the counter variable we have defined. Then after in, again it is the keyword, then it will check from particular function value. So function value, inbuilt function range, that is used here. Here 1, that means you want to start your loop with the value 1. It is optional, but here you have mentioned 1, so your loop starts with the 1. Second value 2, that is 5. So your iteration, that is up to 4. So that is 5 minus 1 up to 4. So upper limit is 5 and your execution of multiple statements, that is up to 4, that is 5 minus 1. And then after you are printing the value of num. So you can see here the output will be printed 1, 2, 3 and 4. Now suppose you are not mentioning the initialize value, that is value 1 in the range function, then what happened? By default it will start from the 0, right? As we already mentioned earlier, if you are not mentioning the value 1, then it will be considering as the 0. So it starts with the 0 and ends till 4. So 0, 1, 2, 3 and 4, that will be executed if you are not mentioning the first value in the range function, right? Another program, here it is given, suppose you want to print the odd numbers from 1 to 10. So here your range is fixed from 1 to 10 and you want to print the odd numbers. So here in the previous example, we have not mentioned the increment variable or increment value, or you can say that the step value. So by default it is 1. But here in this program you are mentioning 2. So your loop value that starts with 1, then after it will jump with plus 2, then after it will print 3, then after again it will incremented by 2. So this way you will print the odd numbers between the range 1 and 10, right? So this way you can use the for statement. Now remember few of the key points while you are using this for loop. So for loop, that is known as counter control loop. If value 1 that is not specified, then by default the value is 0. INCR, if it is not specified, then by default the value is 1. If the value 1 is specified, and it is greater than value 2, then what happened? Then the loop will not be executed. So these are the some of the steps that you have to keep in mind while using the for loop. Now second is while statement. So as we have discussed in the for loop, when you are using this for loop, if you are knowing that that amount of number you want to execute some of the statements, or that amount of time you want to repeatedly execute some of the statements, but in the case suppose you don't know how many times that particular statement will execute, right? So that condition that you are not defining, in that case you are using the while loop. So say for example, till the condition is true, till you want to execute some of the statements, and when the condition will become false, you want to stop execution. Such kind of scenario you have to use this while statement. So you can see here, if you do not know the exact number of times we want to execute an instruction, in that case you can use this while statement. Now basically, before entering into the body of the loop or before execution of any of the statement within the loop, you are checking that condition. That's why it is also called entry control loop. Here you can see the flow control, or you can say that the flow chart, as well as the syntax of while loop. As we have discussed in the for loop, same way you have to initialize some increment variable, you have to initialize some counter variable here, then test expression is here. Here in this condition, if test expression is true, till the expression will be executed, whatever the body or block, or you can say that the set of statement that resides in the body, that will be executed. And if the condition is false, is that case that loop will stop execution. Now what is the syntax? So while, that is the keyword that you have to use, then test expression or test condition that you have to use, then after colon, that ends that particular while statement. Then after whatever the statements you are written, that will be inside the body of the loop, you can say that in the while loop. So indentation, that may automatically applied if you are using some advanced editor. If you are using some editor like Notepad, in that case you have to keep in mind, you have to put some indentation, otherwise compilation will give you error message, right? Now this is the program that indicates the while loop. Now suppose you want to sum of some of the numbers till you are entering the 0. So say for example, first we are defining the number, here you are taking the value from the user. So we are using input function. As you already aware that input function, that will take the value in string, right? But suppose we want to perform some of the arithmetic operation, you are requiring to convert that string into some numeric format. So that's why you are using here typecasting. So integer int function that we are using. So whatever the value entered by the user, that will be converted into the integer. Now sum equal to number. Say for example, you are entering 2. So now 2, that will be assigned to the sum variable. Now you are checking with the while condition, number is not equal to 0. So here we have entered 2, 2 is not equal to 0, right? So this condition satisfied, and if the condition satisfied, whatever the statements inside the loop of the body, that will be executed. So the next statement, that is number equal to input, that is again this statement will ask for some value. Now you are entering some value, say for example 3. Now it will add into your previous value, that is sum equal to sum plus number. So in previously sum having the value 2, now you are entering one another value 3. So now it will added and assign to the sum variable. Now again you can check, you can print that particular thing. Now it will ask for another value. So till you are entering positive value, it will added one by one, and when you are entering the 0, it will stop execution and printing whatever the result, right? That is the one example. Second demonstration for the while loop, suppose you want to print odd numbers, as we have already discussed in the for loop, the same program we are using here with the while loop. So initialize one variable, you can say that the counter variable you are initialized with 1, then after you are checking the condition number less than 10. So till the value of number that is less than 10, whatever the statements inside that body, that will be executed. So what is the statements? So here you have to execute that particular statement. So you can print 1 to 10 here, but you want to print only the odd numbers. So again the next statement you want to execute, that is number equal to number plus 2. So every time it will be added 2. So you can get odd number, right? So this way you can use that while loop. Now we are concluding our session here. In this session, we have discussed two kinds of loop. One is for loop, another is while loop. Now in next subsequent session, we will discuss how to break particular condition or how to break the loop and how to skip some of the statements from the loop. Till then, keep practicing, keep learning. Thank you.